morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene. And today, Saul has titled the episode Locations, Location, Location.
Right, the most important part of a RPG. No, but it is a very critical part of
Well, I think you got to tell people what you're actually talking about.
role-playing games. Well, anytime you play a role-playing game, it's usually set somewhere, a location, right? And sometimes locations can be just window dressing, they call it, just a background for the players to be interacting in, and sometimes it is an important part of the game.
Okay.
Depending on what is going on or what the game is about.
I concur.
So, like, for example, something like window dressing in my book would be like, I know it's a cliche and usually...
The tavern you meet in?
Yeah, I was going to say usually the games don't start off that way, but actually they sometimes do. And the tavern, the classical D&D tavern, usually you don't have to go into too much detail about what that tavern looks like or the patrons of that tavern and stuff like that. Usually it's just a place where the players can get around a table and talk to each other like they would do, like they are in real life, and discuss what they want to do or what direction they want to go in, whether it's at the beginning of the adventure, in the middle, or at the end of the adventure.
I mean, in D&D, it's the tavern. Oh, you meet in a tavern and
Right,
blah,
right.
blah, blah. But like in Liminal, they'll have like I don't like to use the term clubhouse, but
The club.
what do they call it? Like
the clubhouse.
they call it something, a specific thing.
I don't remember actually. I know what you're talking about. Once you said clubhouse, that's all that's in my brain. But a meeting place. Yes. Usually it's some sort of like clubhouse though, treehouse maybe. That'd be cool. So Liminal is a modern urban fantasy setting game, role-playing game. So it would be different than, but I guess it's based in Europe, or specifically England. So they would meet at a pub, maybe.
Or the room behind the pub.
Right, the meeting room at the pub. Yeah,
or the meeting room at the bookstore that somebody owns.
Oh, yeah, that's good too. So those places are like window dressing for the most part, right? It's somewhere for...
Maybe not in Liminal. Maybe you actually have it. You actually have your meeting, your base mapped out. Maybe you don't, but maybe in...
Possibly.
Yeah.
Like, especially if you have like...
This is where we keep all the guns.
Yeah, especially have stuff like that. And this is the arcane library.
Yes.
Those super rare books. Exactly. So some place like that may or may not be map or detailed. It doesn't necessarily have to be mapped, but have details about it. But let's say just a place where people meet up and have a conversation about whatever.
So you consider those places just window dressing?
That's what I call them, yes.
Okay.
And by window dressing, I mean you don't have to go into too much detail about what it looks like. And you don't have to go into like really detailed stuff.
Because it's okay no matter what people are envisioning. It doesn't matter.
Correct. So on the other hand, let's say you're going to do a heist.
Okay.
And the heist location, doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a corporate building, a lord's keep, or an outpost on a different planet, probably might need some details on that, a little bit more details.
Well, yeah, especially if there's going to be like interaction there, like fighting or trying to discover where the treasure is.
So a few games out there will tell you, look,
like if you buy a module, a lot of the times they have maps for those places.
Correct. I was gonna say I was gonna counter that by citing Feng Shui that says don't use maps no matter what. Right? It says that.
I know.
In the rules.
Well, Feng Shui is a, but you do use Feng Shui is one of the ones that I have down as locations are important. Maps aren't important, but locations are important.
Right. So I think you're right, and that's an interesting aspect of looking at locations is it's important, but it doesn't necessarily have to be mapped out. Which I think a lot of people go, what?
Well, Feng Shui, you're supposed to be improvised, right? You're supposed to look around you and use what's there.
Correct. And I think what they mean by don't use maps, and this was in the first edition of the rules. I'm not sure about the second. I'm sure it's so integral to the rules of Feng Shui that it's probably still in the second edition. I have both sets of rules, but
I hate to tell you, but we still map out stuff sometimes because I know Felipe has done it, and I know you do it too.
yes. So the idea behind Feng Shui, and when the author tells you, don't map out things, is because you want to use the imagination of the players to fill in the location, right? Mm-hmm. And I think Robin D. Laws is the writer. I think there's a fundamental idea that he has, and it rings true, that when you put a map down or the GM gives a very detailed description of what the place looks like, that's all there is to it. That's all that's there. And it doesn't give the players any input as to what could be there, right? When you have a real detailed map of a location of a room, of a house, they're like, oh, okay, I got it. I understand what's there. And then that puts that building, that location in a box. And that's all there is to it. But when you say there's no map and the GM says, okay, it is and I love this, I always use this description in Feng Shui. It's a construction site of a future building, but all they've done is dug a hole where they got to do with the foundation. And if the GM just says that, you're like, okay, what else is there?
You do not know what the players are going to come up
with. Yeah, they don't know what the players come up with. And then I've used that location, and it worked out so well that's because I keep using that as a reference, as an example. I hadn't thought of anything. I thought maybe, well, there'd be some they always have those cement things in there, right? Those cement circles.
Pieces. Do you mean the ones that turn the cement?
No. They're actually like tubes of cement, and they kind of interlock with each other, and they make a big tunnel. I don't know what they use them for, but there's always some at every construction site. And then there's like slabs of rebar, pipe, metal, iron, and stuff. And maybe a trailer or somewhere they have maps and the schematics or whatever.
And there's power tools laying around.
Well, it depends on the site, but so when
in my mind there's power tools laying around.
Right, there's going to be some power tools laying around. And in one game, somebody said, "Well, is there a little forklift?"
Yeah.
I go, oh yeah, sure. There's a forklift. And what it does is, because you're so vague, it allows the players to come up with stuff that might be there.
Right.
To fill in the gaps of your description or non-description. And I think that works really well. And it works really well with Feng Shui. Other games possibly might work well, or maybe not work well, would be like, I would say, Shadowrun, right? Where there's some very detailed things that are usually included in a site or a location, especially one there where the Shadowrunners, the group, is trying to get into try to get, hopefully get out of, whether they have to extract information or a person. That is very important to know what kind of security, how many cameras there are, and the locations of those cameras, blah, 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 blah. It could be a huge, long list of things. And these are all things that the players want to know because they want to be able to circumvent them.
And they will ask you. So
and that's another thing, is they'll ask you for those details. And if you haven't thought about it, let me tell you, players are smart. I've always been not amazed, but I've been pleasantly surprised that players, for the most part, and I would say like 90% of the players that I played with, are pretty damn smart and clever. And they'll see a plot hole that I hadn't thought of myself, like, oh, I put a camera there. They're like, why would there be a camera there? The angles are terrible. Like, I've actually had people say that to me in a game. I'm like, oh, right? They go, well, this camera covers this side, this camera covers that side. That camera, it only sees like 1/5 of the hallway or something. I'm like, yeah, I don't know why they put a camera there. And so the problem with that is they take an interest in that camera. Like, what is that camera? Is it a camera?
You just said there was a camera there just because, there should be a camera there.
Yeah, just throwing cameras willy-nilly. And they're talking about angles and all this other stuff. Maybe it's something else, and maybe
go with it.
Maybe it's a turret laser or something hidden behind the camera. So whatever. So I think I've run into things like that all the time, where I think I just put.
And if they think there's a turret laser hidden behind that camera,
well, there is.
Now there is one. Yeah, I mean, come on.
And that's another thing, is that you use the imagination of the players against them, right? Because
you allow them to create what they want, right?
So I think that's pretty interesting. So location for me is very important for a lot of different reasons. And a lot of it for me is description, right? When you describe one, you don't necessarily have to map it out, but you have, if it's an important place or a place of interest, you should have a pretty good description of what it looks like.
I don't know if you remember, but one year at PacificCon, you and I went to a lecture on how to be a better GM or something.
Like that, yeah.
And I just remember the one thing I took away from that lecture was the guy was nice. He had played for a long time, and he said, when you describe something, everybody's going to see it differently.
Yeah.
So if you describe it and show them a picture, any picture, like you're describing a cave, and everybody has an idea of what this cave looks like. If you pull up a picture and say, this is my idea of what the cave looks like, after they've all got the picture, imagined it, then that helps them to, oh, it's not a little cave. It's got a big, giant, wide opening.
Right.
So I always think that if you can give a picture, even if you just pull it up on your tablet or your phone or whatever, and I did that recently in a Shadowrun game because these people want to know everything. Okay. So I go, okay, I had them at a cathedral. So we were in Seattle. So I found an actual cathedral in Seattle and printed it out because we were going to be playing around the table. And if I give them a picture, they can pass it around, right? Or print out. The same thing I did for the artifact that they were searching for.
Right.
I found an artifact and then I printed it and someone took it. I lost it. But anyway, they knew what it looked like.
They want to give it back.
And I still remember, and I was looking for an office building for them, that the one that they destroyed. I was looking for an office building, a complex, right? So I go on the internet and I couldn't find what I wanted, so I just printed out something, and I had passed it out to someone, and then Steve says to me, "Well, it would help if I knew what this compound looked like." I'm all, can someone give him the picture? And because he wanted to know the angles to come in from, because in Shadowrun, angles are a very important thing, right?
Everything's important in Shadowrun, yes.
So passing out those, and then they go, well, we need to draw this. I go ahead. I had the map out. I always let the players draw what they're thinking, right? Instead of me doing it, because that takes my valuable brain space trying to keep up with them. So Ian goes, okay, give me the picture. And he drew out the floor. And I go, okay, cool. So then
on a mat.
Yeah.
Yes,
because he took the picture and he put it on the mat.
He blew it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. To put figures on it.
We didn't even have figures. Well, we used little dice. So it was pretty funny that the location is very important, and how you present the location is part of the game, right? When they were going to another office building, I just said it's a square office building, a high rise, and it's on floor. The floor you're looking for is above 22.
Oh yeah.
And then I go, okay, it's a square. They go, what does it look like? I go, it has offices around the whole building, and when you walk in, there is a reception area and an elevator behind that goes all the way up and down. And
a bank of elevators. Yeah, you said that.
And they went with it. They all kind of had an idea of what that was. Maybe they all didn't have the same idea, but they were all good with it until we got to right and left later on in that particular one. And that had more to do with Kathy and Saul than anything else.
Me, I had no problem with that. I had no problem with that. You're right. I think in that in that one game, you illustrate the location in two different ways. One was a actual map of the inside, like like a blueprint almost of the place, and the other one was just an idea. It's a tower. Like I was thinking of Nakatomi Tower, right?
Yeah.
There was an elevator banks in the middle.
That's so funny because when I said it, I thought of that tower too. Maybe I watched that movie too many times.
From Die Hard, right? Yeah. If you don't understand the reference. So one was a very, very detailed description. The other one was more or less a very plain description, but it was evocative of what you wanted to show.
Everybody's been in almost everybody's been in a tall office building,
right? Or at least seen one on television.
Yeah,
and seen it blown up on television.
Yeah.
So when you said the tall building is just a big square, maybe a rectangle-ish, and the elevator banks in the middle. I thought of that movie, and I thought of Nakatomi Plaza, and I was like, oh yeah, I could see that.
And the parking garage was underneath. It's all
classic.
office building.
Yeah.
Right? It's the classic office building.
So I think in that sense, you did a really good job, and I think that is a sign of a pretty good GM who knows that certain things are going to be a little bit more. What is it that the players are going to want more detail than other ones, right? And I think when Steve goes, well, can I get like a map of this? And then you're like, everybody else has seen it, but him, I don't know where he was. Who knows? And then he sees it, he goes, oh, okay, I see what's going on now. And we go, can we get behind it? Is there like a way to get to the dock area? And the map didn't have one of those, but you just said, oh, there's just a road on this side. And you're like, oh, like a little access road or whatever. And then we're like, okay, good. And I think it's a very interesting that I hadn't thought of that when I thought of this episode or the idea of locations. And I think that's why I say locations are very important, because GMs fret over locations all the time. As I'm a GM.
I was on the internet trying to find things that would convey where it doesn't have, because locations are generic in one sense, right? But they're specific in another sense, that like it's a cathedral in Seattle. So if you actually find a cathedral in Seattle that you can print out, it gives it more gravitas than just a hand-drawn cathedral, right?
Or just like just a plain description. And I've totally forgot about the cathedral. Instead of just a plain description, oh, it's a cathedral, and instead of a map that's kind of like a blueprint map, it was just a picture. And in each case, that was all you needed, right, to invoke what you wanted in the minds of the players. In the building, the square building, everybody knew what that was. The research area, the research building, we wanted a little bit more detail because we were thinking about infiltrating it more, and it mattered more to us as players. And then the picture for the thing is like, oh, okay, once we had that picture, I knew what the rest of it looked like. And I think that is what I was talking about when I came up with this idea of location, is that locations, you don't have to detail everything, right? You don't have to detail every single location that they might come across. And I think that's a waste of time. A lot of times I run things in places where people know. Like when I ran Monterey Dresden, I ran it on Cannery Row because a lot of people go to Cannery Row, and because it's a tourist area. Mm-hmm. And I thought it would be a perfect place to have
especially since this is where we live, right?
Strange going-ons in the place where people go all the time.
Yeah. Or maybe only have gone once. And if you don't live in California, you probably have never gone there, right? Unless you took a vacation or something. But if you're back east, there are other locations like that you could use.
I don't know. I think
Manhattan.
Monterey gets a lot of.
I'm just saying.
People from a lot of. I don't know about inside the United States. You're right.
That's what I'm saying, because usually when we go there in the summer, it's all German tourists and Japanese tourists.
Just say foreign.
I say German because they're actually speaking in German.
I hear all kinds of languages there. So the reason I used Cannery Row is because a lot of local people have been there at least once or twice, possibly more, because it's a really nice place to go. And they have a lot of. If you want to go whale watching, you go to Monterey Bay. You can
but you go to the wharf instead of the.
Yeah, but you usually head out to eat at Cannery Row. Cannery Row itself is a place. The aquarium is on Cannery Row, right? So
Bubba Gump's is there, which is the boys' favorite restaurant in Monterey.
I don't know why they love it so much, because it's like a fish place. But
because we've been taking them since they were little.
Since they were very little. So when I base my game there, a lot of times I would just say, "Oh, it's the building next to Bubba Gump's," or it's on the beach. Park. It's on the beach right there by the restaurant and stuff like that. And so people would know where that was. And if they didn't, I had plenty of pictures of those locations, right? And so I would just show them what it looked like. And I didn't have any detail, like when I would say, oh, it's Bubba Gump's, they're like, oh, I didn't have any detail what the place looked like inside. I just told them what it was, and they're like, okay. And because nothing really happened inside my idea was nothing was going to happen inside the Bubba Gump's restaurant. It's just that there was a worker that was involved in the case that worked there. What it did was for for them, the players, they were able to get it straight in their heads what they were looking at, or what the place looked like. And I thought that was important. A lot of times when you describe some place that you've never been to, it can be a little bit hard to convey exactly what that place looks like just by words alone. And I've done that before too. But I think when you have a place that you've been to, like I was just just an idea came to my head was a bookstore, right? We have several bookstores that we go to, and Jolene actually countered the idea that about the couple that we have gone to, or the few that we go to, and mentioned one from our past called B. Dalton's or Walton's Books, which was in the mall, right? And that's a totally different looking bookstore than the mom and pop store in downtown Campbell, or the big Barnes and Noble building bookstore that is in San Jose. Huge bookstore, right? So each one of those, when I say bookstore, which one are the players gonna imagine? I don't know. There's no way I could know, right? And so when you come up with a location and you use a location like a bookstore, everybody's gonna immediately gonna come up with a bookstore they know. When you say bookstore and then you go ahead and start describing it, it's good to have a very good reference of what that place looks like in your head, unless you have pictures.
Well, if in whatever town you live in, if you still have a bookstore, you just say
hopefully
it's like the Barnes and Noble on Stevens Creek, and everybody knows that, right?
Right. And if they've never been there, then you say, then you can describe it in a lot of detail because you've been there many times.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Recycled Books here in San Jose. They have a couple locations, and the one downtown is a very it's like an old storefront type of place. It could have been a furniture store in previous incarnations or whatever, but it's now a little bookstore. And if you go by the description, I can describe where the science fiction and then the children's books side is and all that stuff, and where the clerks stand or where the cashier is and stuff like that. When I give that description, it can be very detailed, and people can see it in their mind's eye, right? And that's all I need to do. In other situations, like you had, I love your Shadowrun game because it is an example of the different types of locations and how to use them in a game. There's the detailed map, the picture, and just the description. I think that incorporates everything about locations that most players and GMs need to know. And when you are running the game as a GM, you got to figure out what locations the players are really going to take an interest in, and what locations players are just going to want to know what it looks like or what's happening there.
I remember a game, and I don't remember if it was Pathfinder or D&D, but you told us we were on a road, and one side had a hill, a foresty hill, and the other side had kind of went down and there was a stream. And after you said that, you got 20 questions from Steve and the boys. So they wanted to know the slope of the hill, what kind of trees, what the stream was like. Was it a stream or was it a river? And I remember you ended up having to draw it out on the map and put on the mat, and you had to literally explain everything because they knew that there was an ambush coming and they wanted to know exactly what was going on, right? So it doesn't matter what it is. Sometimes that road and what's surrounding it is a very important location, whether it is or not, whether you're just driving through or...
Well, let me tell you, after all that work, there's going to be a goddamn ambush there. They brought it upon themselves. Now, I have no recollection of that. This is pretty funny. There may or may not have been an ambush there. I don't remember already planned. You say there was, so I probably did. And the fact that I must have, forecasted it or played, they played my hand because you're right. I do remember a situation where they kept asking me more details, and I tried to explain it more, and I remember just getting frustrated and go, okay, I'll just put it on the map. Or they may have suggested it.
They did, and they started drawing it out, yes.
Yeah, well...
The boys love to draw. Some of the boys. Augustine doesn't love to draw. Ian loves to draw. And
yes.
And then when they started asking about the slope of the hill, I go, oh man, we're going to have to run up that hill. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, that was funny. I don't remember that game, and I don't remember what was the.
I don't either. I just remember the locations part, the idea that everybody sees the location differently, right? Saul just says you're going down a road and there's a mountain on one side and a stream on the other.
It goes down to a stream on the other, yeah.
And everybody has a different idea, and they want to know the kind of trees, the slope of the hill,
how much cover they have.
Where there's cover and all that other stuff, right?
Well, when we were coming down, that's pretty funny because now that I think about it, I think about when we were coming back from Yosemite and we came down. When we came down,
yeah,
we were following it's Madrid, not Madrid River. What's that called?
Madrid. I can't.
It starts with an M.
Anyway,
that river, and you're right. We're coming out. It basically was just following the river, the road, and there was a mountain on one side, and it was a steep mountain. It wasn't like climate really, and then there was the road, and then off the other side of the road, it just went down again into the stream of the.
It was a river.
Yes, Merced River. Yes, I believe it is called, not Madrid. might be a different continent, but the Merced River, and I never knew that it was like there was a river there, and it was a nice river. At the time, we were still in the drought, but now it probably has a lot more water in it.
Well, yeah, because of the snow melt, yeah.
So there's actually snow and there's water in it, but I can just imagine how pretty it looks. But that would have been a perfect location, but in my mind's eye, but I didn't have that, and it's just funny that I mentioned that, or you mentioned that, and it brought me to that. Visually into that, and that's probably what I was thinking of. Probably not such a steep mountain.
Yeah, that would have been a hard mountain to go up.
To climb. But I like the idea that they were kind of suspicious of the situation, because I guess I hadn't described roads too much to them, and I think that's pretty interesting that they came up with this idea that something was going to happen because I was giving them a description of the road they were on.
Yeah.
That fact alone made them a little suspicious, and I think that's what happens sometimes. Is that especially if, as a GM, I was very transparent when I would do that, right? If I would just always describe stuff, it wouldn't raise the red flag as, oh, something's going to happen here because Saul's describing something. If I described, the roads and the fauna all the time, they're like, oh, okay. They're like, then they might, dance and skip right into my trap, but that didn't happen, and I wasn't that type of GM. I think as a GM, we should be a little bit more descriptive in a lot of things that may seem not important, simply to throw them off. Because, like, you're right. Because when I was describing something, they're like, oh, why is he this? And it happens all the time. It's not like I'm the only one that's ever suffered from this. There's this idea that anytime a GM describes something or has a map,
there's going to be an encounter.
Exactly. And I remember it was funny because I was running a game at the convention at PacificCon. What is it called? Low Life 2090. And one of the players, this lady, mentioned that if everything in the adventure, because I told them it was a published adventure, if everything in the adventure was including what I said, did I make something up? Make a few of the encounters up? I said, no, everything was in there. I go, why did you ask? He goes, well, sometimes you would have a map, and sometimes you wouldn't. I'm like, oh. I go, well, what happened is that sometimes they included a map, but sometimes they didn't. And I think a lot of times what happened was they made an issue out of a certain location where the people who made the adventure didn't think there was going to be any issue there.
Well, that's the fun part about role playing, right? You never know what the players are going to have their characters do.
And it was funny because, like, I had a mat underneath because I basically made copies of these maps that they came in with the adventure, and I would throw the map down and we just point to where they wanted. And then other time, well, like at the apartment that there wasn't a map of, I had to draw it out on a mat. And so she was questioning whether those were included in the adventure or did I just make them up. I said, no, they're included in the adventure, but they didn't give me a map because that would have been a lot of pages. And I'm guessing. And she goes, oh, I thought it was interesting. It goes, did you really? And I go, and I never thought of players being that, I don't know what you would call that,
Observant?
Well, there's observant, but they're also like outside observant, right? It's not the characters observant.
Right.
It is the player.
It's
observant.
metagaming,
Right?
yeah.
And I thought it was very interesting, and I think a clue that she wanted a clue into what was in the game and what was I making up stuff, and I think I was.
That's an interesting question.
Yeah, and another thing is the only thing they didn't ask me about was whether I had invented this a burger place across the street that had cameras, and because the place that they were investigating, they wanted more information of, and
had you invented the burger place across the street?
yes, because there was no burger place, there was nothing across the street that the adventure included, but they wanted a video of the area, and of course the one they were investigating didn't supposedly didn't have video, and which was a lie, but they wanted video, and I'm like, well, what's I go? What they asked me like, what's across the street? Maybe they have video, a security camera, and I'm like, oh, it's a burger place, and they go, what's the name of the burger place? I'm like, fudge. I go, Flippin' Burger, and then they're going, okay, we're gonna go in there, and so then it became a thing, right? I'm like, oh shoot, so they're like, so then I was like being really saucy. I was like, man, you guys are making me come up with stuff, right? So I made the place, they're supposed to be rude and surly. That's the whole, we're going to talk to somebody. Well, I go, it's a burger place, okay, we're going to order something. So I go, okay, you guys go up to the counter. Okay, what do you want on your flippin' burger? I go, did they actually say that? Yeah. Are you asking me? And then the person goes, hey, did you hear what I said? What do you want on your flipping burger? Well, there's a line behind you. And so they're like, okay. So then but they remembered the name of the place, which I thought was funny. And they never questioned me whether that was part of the adventure. And so it was totally made up. And then so they got a video of the place, right, of the front, and they got a little bit more information about who was going ins and outs of that place.
So they created a location.
So they created a location simply by asking me what's across the street. And I'm thinking, well, what is across the street? And I just threw that out there, and it was kind of funny because like then they were always joking about the flipping burger because they thought it was funny, and it was something that I had just done up off the cuff, and never did they question me about whether it was part of the adventure or not part of the adventure, because they got a lot of information out of it. And another thing I thought is that on the fly, when they were like trying to get more information, how to get information, and there was in the scenario there was a couple ways to get it, but I couldn't
get them to do it.
I couldn't figure out how to get them to that point.
That's when it's a written adventure that you haven't, because usually when you do an adventure you kind of let the player figure out how they're going to figure it out, right? But if it's written down, sometimes it's a little bit hard to.
Right, and I was new to the game. I was like, this is like a brand new game that had come out, and it was the first time running it. But it went off really good. It was really smooth. I think Felipe, Mike, and a couple other people, this lady and a guy were playing, and they played the game really well, and it went off really well, and I had a fun time running it. And I was like, that location just popped up. There was the location where the adventure took place, across the street, which led to another place, which led to another place. But I thought it was interesting that the player figured out, well, there's no maps in certain places and there's maps in other places. I wonder what's going on there. And
so locations are important, whether you're, and I think it's a good idea. You were saying that Feng Shui tries to not put the location into a box.
Right.
Well, you can have it drawn out, but if they're looking for a secret room or something, then you got to give it to them, right?
Well, it depends on what it is, but yes.
Different things like that. I just think that gives the players a chance to create in the world, right?
Right. Yeah, I think and what Feng Shui tries to do is that it uses it for cinematic purposes, yes. Right? Like a John Wick movie or any action Hong Kong movie or any big action movie. Is there a chandelier? Oh, yeah, there's a chandelier. Of course there is. They're going to swing from the chandelier. There's no question as to why would this place have a chandelier, yeah. Right? And then if you go to a hotel lobby, a lot of times they'll have some sort of, not a lot of times, a few times they'll have some sort of art.
Yeah.
I forget what lobby it was. Oh, it was a hospital. They have this glass, hand-blown glass art.
I think you're thinking about the Bellagio and
no, it looks like that, okay. But it's the one, I don't, you've never been to it, but the hospital in Mountain View where I take her mom for the heart thing. They have this really really weird looking glass structures and hanging from the ceiling, which I'm thinking probably not a blessed place to hang glass in the earthquake zone, but hey, whatever. But it's really neat, right? It's just really pretty. I don't know if you could swing from it. I think they're on poles, but you can put them on. You don't want glass swinging. So it would be on poles, like stationary poles. But anyway, so you can like do something with that. But I think players when they are able to come up with stuff and insert it into the game and it's plausible, inside of a hotel lobby, it's just not a bulldozer or something like that. Right. But if it's plausible, then I think that makes them a little bit excited about playing in your game.
The one thing I like about Feng Shui is if you lose your gun or you run out of bullets, there's always another gun, because.
Well, yeah, you just drop 10 bad guys. There's got to be
exactly. So you learn from the movies that as you go, you just pick up another gun and you keep going, right?
Right. And I wouldn't worry about running out of bullets.
But, no, not in Feng Shui.
Yeah. Well, you can run out of bullets, but yeah, it's usually in a big cinematic way.
Yes. But in other games, you have to keep track of all your bullets.
Right.
Which I like. The thing I like about Feng Shui is you don't have to do that kind of stuff, right?
So locations are important for every game. Different locations have a different amount of detail that you need, and like I said, I can. Your one scenario that you ran is very illustrative of the different types of detail that you can have, and different levels of detail that players need. Sometimes they need a lot or want a lot, and sometimes they just could use with a verbal description, and sometimes a picture will do. And I think I've done that in the past. I haven't thought about it, but I've done that in the past when I was running Monterey Dresden, and when I didn't think about it, something I was like, I didn't want to verbally describe it. I just took a picture of places, and this is what it looks like. This is the beach where it's at. This is the park where such and such happened. This is the tree that the car hit, and it gives them a real life view of how big the tree is, how far it is from where the next accident took place, and stuff like that, because it was this chain of reaction.
I think anytime you use photos or your tablet or your computer, or give them a video, they always say a picture's worth 1,000 words.
That's true,
and it really is, because you can't describe everything in that picture, or it's going to take you an hour or two, right?
And in an instant too, that you can relay that kind of information to 5 players, and it only takes a couple seconds.
Yeah, they all are going to see what they see, and they all might have different idea about what's inside a cathedral.
Right.
But this gives them like a little framework.
Right. Very good. So I really like the idea of locations. I really like the idea of using them for different purposes and different levels of details, depending on what's going to happen or what do you want to happen in that place.
So there you go. Hopefully Saul's giving you ideas of different kinds of locations to use and how to use them in your game. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene.
And you have a good day.